Welcome to Living Longer, Living Well. I'm your host, Brian Callanan. On this program, we're hoping to start a discussion that is difficult for a lot of families. Finding a way to care for our elders that is dignified and economically feasible. To do that, we're going to look at aging from 3 different perspectives. Elders who live alone, with family, or in a care facility. So, if you're an elder or the adult child of one, we invite you to learn about some of the biggest choices you and your family may ever face. Lopez Island in the San Juans is home to some unforgettable beauty. And a 70-year-old with an unforgettable name, Liz Taylor.
I give people one chance in a lifetime to make a Liz Taylor joke, and then I assassinate them.
Liz is not one to pull punches. She was an aging expert and newspaper columnist for 14 years. These days, she's simply trying to live out her own advice.
It's not something that is nearly as easy as I thought it was. Hey, Lola.
Right now, Liz is not suffering from any major health problems. Her biggest concern? Paying the rent.
I'm almost not getting by. I'm on Social Security only. Come on, babe. Come on.
To stretch her $1,200 a month check, she moved out of Seattle and into a low-income unit on Lopez Island.
Coming here was important for housing.
Taylor is not married and is not in touch with the siblings in her family. A sobering picture for anyone of an older age, but not a unique one. Research from the nonprofit Population Reference Bureau shows 27% of women aged 65 to 74 live alone in the U.S., a figure that climbs even higher as women get older.
I will be independent, I hope, until I die, but we also don't have any control over that.
Liz has drawn up a plan for her future by investing in a long-term care insurance policy in case she needs more help.
It's a matter of how do you protect yourself.
And she may lean on others in her community to look out for her too.
And I have friends who I think would step in to do that, but I haven't tested them.
Put simply, aging is an art Liz Taylor is still trying to master. But this one-time columnist says we all have the power to write our own story. What she calls aging deliberately, even in the rough waters of a youth-centered society.
Our whole society is in a massive effort to deny aging. We need to be less gentle sometimes with aging, because you got to know what the reality is.
And we have a panel of experts to help us understand more about some of the challenges of aging, including Paula Houston. She is CEO of Sound Generations, the largest nonprofit provider of senior services in King County. Paula, good to have you.
Thank you.
We also have with us Dwayne Clark, Chairman and CEO of Aegis Living, a network of assisted living facilities in Washington, California, and Nevada. Dwayne, good to have you. And we have Karen Fredrickson Goldson, a UW professor who's an expert on aging and marginalized populations, especially the LGBTQ community. Karen, great to have you.
Thank you.
And finally, we have Maureen Lenahan. She is Division Director for Aging and Disability Services in the City of Seattle's Human Services Department. Great to have you all.
Thank you.
And so we've just seen this story here about an older person living by herself, no family, getting by on Social Security. When you hear elderly person living alone, what goes through your mind? Paula, I'll start with you here. Describe the work you do with Sound Generations and how you might interact with, connect with a person in this type of situation.
Sure. One of the things that struck me about Liz is the fact that she said she wants to stay independent, isn't connected to any of her family, may or may not be connected to some of the other people in her community. And we know from research that one of the things that will allow a senior's health to deteriorate quicker than almost anything else is isolation, social isolation. There's a statistic that says that a senior who is isolated has the same negative health effects as somebody who smokes 15 cigarettes a day. So one of the things that we do at Sound Generations is we make sure that seniors who want to stay independent in their homes are also living interdependently in their communities. And by that we mean being connected socially and emotionally to others in their communities. And the way we do that is through our senior centers. We run 6 senior centers throughout King County. It's a place where seniors can come and get a hot meal, interact with people over that meal, and then also participate in our enhanced fitness, enhanced wellness programs, all other measure of activities, bingo and card games and music. So those are the things things that someone like Liz I would be concerned about, is making sure she's getting that social and emotional support.
Thanks very much for that. Dwayne, I'll move to you here. I want to get some background on your connection to the challenges of aging. So I know from your personal story, caring for your mother with Alzheimer's, it's played a big role in terms of how you approach your work. So tell me, if you can, about that personal story and the work you do now. What do you start thinking about when you hear older person living alone?
Well, I think, first of all, I agree with everything that Paula said, because I think isolation not only creates a turmoil for a person's mental health, it creates a tremendous turmoil for a person's physical health. I've been writing a longevity book for about 4 years now, studying principles of longevity and living well from around the world. And one of the things I was surprised by with people who live a long, long time is the fact that purpose is one of the greatest things that enable people to live long, well lives, both from a physical and mental standpoint. And I think, you know, with my own personal situation with my mom, she lived with my sister. She was isolated because my sister was a social worker. She was gone a great deal, part of the time. When she moved into my community, she moved into an Aegis. She was actually, you know, a customer of mine. So I got to be not only the CEO, but a customer of my own company, which was an education in and of itself.
Yeah.
It reframed my whole way to do business. So I think the issue for me is that people need community around you, and you need purpose. That's what gives people a reason for being and a reason for living, and that's what struck me about this video.
Fair enough. Karen, I'll move to you here. You work with and study LGBTQ and other marginalized people within the elderly population. When you hear older person living alone, what do you think about?
Well, we're conducting a study, the National Health, Aging, Sexuality, and Gender Study, Aging with Pride, and it's a national study. It's the first ever. It's funded by the National Institutes of Health and the National Institute on Aging, specifically to understand health and well-being over time for LGBT older adults. It's part of the Healthy Generation Center that I direct at the University of Washington. So what I think about when I think about people, older adults living alone, is all of the issues that have been mentioned. But then they're often intensified for people that have been historically disadvantaged. So when we look at LGBT older adults, for example, they have health disparities. So already, because of disadvantages in social disadvantages, economic, environmental, they're already more likely to experience poor health, disability, more distress, and more mental health problems. So, and they're also more likely, especially among older gay and bisexual men, to live alone. Again, most of their peer support, not always, some have children, but similar to
Liz, yeah.
Liz, yes, that many are living alone, and most of their support system is peer-based. So they're all aging together. And so I am always concerned, especially for the long-term survivors who outlive those friends. Although it's wonderful to see how Liz, like many people in the LGBT community, have very strong networks of friends and other types and extended family that are also willing to support. But people that live alone are at risk. They're at elevated risk of all of the kinds of disparities that I've talked about.
Maureen, I'll move to you here. Talk about the work you're doing with the City of Seattle in terms of our older population, and tell me what you start thinking about when you hear older person living alone.
Well, coming from a point of view of a provider of social services, immediately I want to get in that situation and fix it, right?
Yeah, right.
But that's the inclination that we have to hold back on, and I think in our society we often make assumptions that an older person living alone, that's a bad scenario, and that's where we need to really check ourselves. That's not necessarily a bad scenario. Liz has planned her life and has deliberately moved into that setting.
Yeah.
And as I say, as professionals, we really need to make sure we step back for a minute and make sure, is this, you know, is this person, is this what they want, and is this the life they want to lead?
Yep.
And then we come in and help if they're ready to make a change, but not to make the assumption because someone is living alone that they are ready to make a change. Yep. The other thing I want to say, going on the more social work side of the point of view, is somebody like that would be at high risk if social isolation, and if she's not connected, if there are changes in her health, or she starts exhibiting memory loss, yep, or is potentially financially exploited, people are not going to notice if she's not connected.
Paul, let me head back to you here. I want to talk about one of the main challenges faced by elders in our community here, maintaining one's independence but not outliving one's resources there. I know it's a huge question, but I need to ask it. What's the best way for elders to do that?
Well, that's one of the reasons we exist, is because we know that low-income elders are going to be at the most risk of outliving their resources, because they had minimal resources to begin with. So, many of our programs are free or donation based, and we want to make sure that we keep them that way. The City of Seattle is our largest funder, and we're very grateful to them that they continue to make sure that we are able to keep programs like Meals on Wheels, like our transportation programs at free or very, very low cost or donation based.
Okay. All right. Dwayne, I'll move to you here. I'm thinking about this. I know the research shows a lot of older adults live by themselves, especially women here. 56% of women nationwide older than 85 are living alone. And I know we're living longer and healthier. We've certainly seen that. But when does that desire to be independent turn into a danger?
Well, I think, one of the things that we really value with our residents is personal choice. So I think from a societal standpoint, we have to be very careful about making that choice for our elderly. And I mean, there's obvious things. If someone's not taking their medication, or they're driving and they're impaired and so on, there's obvious things that I think you have to look for. But I always try to put myself and say, geez, if I'm 87 years old and, this is the way I want to live my life and it's my last year on this planet, I want to have that personal choice. And so I think as providers, care providers, or people that run communities like this, we have to give people that opportunity to make as much of that choice as possible.
Thanks for that. Let me ask you, Karen, looking at your research, I think in some cases, our elders might be living alone because they don't know how to ask for help, or they might be afraid to in some cases too. How often is that happening? Do you see that?
Well, first of all, among many older adults from historically disadvantaged communities, they have experienced discrimination in both health and human services. So they may be very reluctant to want to get help. So we find for LGBT older adults are more likely to rely on friends, which can be a very good thing, although when you do need help, it's good to be able to reach out. But again, many LGBTQ older adults are more likely to want to go back into the closet because they really fear needing or relying, they feel vulnerable if they need to rely on services. So what we're trying to do, and through the City of Seattle, we were funded to create a program, Generations Aging with Pride, is to start having conversations in communities. This is true for all older adults, and certainly true for Liz as she was planning. She was being very conscious in her planning, and that's so important. But to create conversations so people can think about the different scenarios and what they might need, and to think about them earlier rather than later or once an emergency occurs. And within the LGBT community, it's very critical that people start thinking about aging, because it hasn't been really a topic much in the community.
That's why we're talking about it right here.
Exactly.
Thank you for bringing that up. Maureen, I'm going to head to you here. In terms of elders who are living independently, what is the best way to sustain that and prepare for the future? As we saw in that piece there, the woman we profiled stays active. She's invested in long-term care insurance. Is that a good option? What advice do you have for older people who do want to try to live by themselves?
So my primary advice is to educate yourself, and there are a lot of resources available. There's a lot of resources that we fund, and it's really it's not putting your head in the sand, and it's being aware of what your future may look like, and planning for it, and making use of the resources that are available to plan for that. And it really is the people who don't plan or pretend like they can, their life will continue on the same way it is today. Those are the individuals who get in trouble.
So my advice to people that are thinking about buying long-term care insurance programs is have your financial planner really look at this program carefully, because you think you may be buying insurance for this, but there's a lot of loopholes where the insurance provider may get out of it, at the risk of making my friends who run insurance companies mad at me. The coverage is not that great, to be honest. And there's been some statistics that says if you just get a return on your investment at 4 or 5%, you'd be better to put your money that you pay in premiums into an account that's getting that kind of yield than to buy a premium.
Thank you for that. We're going to get back to some of these issues in just a minute here, but first I want to take a look at another way that we are aging with the help of family caregivers. This is a story of a husband caring for his wife in their later years, and we're about to look at the challenges they are both trying to overcome. 79-year-old Jing Chen Lee is a Tai Chi master who volunteers at North Bellevue Community Center. But behind the calm focus and precise movements is a man dealing with some intense stress 24 hours a day.
那么现在呢，我就是这样，用我太太的话。
Lee says other than teaching Tai Chi twice a week, his time is completely taken up taking care of his 79-year-old wife, who's legally blind. Lee says she has fallen 3 times since they came to America about 6 years ago. They emigrated from China to be near their 3 children.
一般来说的话，
Yet Lee says he wants to give his children personal space and independence in their busy lives with jobs and kids of their own. So that's why Master and Mrs. Lee are here, living in a small subsidized apartment and getting by on Social Security.
那么那个时候的话，
What will I do when I get older? Asks Lee, wondering if he'll get more help to take care of his wife. And studies show he's not alone. The National Center for Health Statistics says spouses make up 21% of the informal caregivers for people over age 65 in the U.S. Almost half of those caregivers say they're dealing with more than they can handle, or they don't have time for themselves.
那会不会播的，就是会不会快把你觉得很
That's where Catherine Wong comes in. She works with the Family Caregiver Support Program from the nonprofit Chinese Information and Service Center.
If you don't taking care yourself well, you cannot taking care your loved one.
Wong says despite Lee's dedication to his wife, he has needed a hand, especially getting to appointments or the grocery store because he doesn't drive. So CISC has helped Lee and others take a step in the right direction, linking them with services and an important network of friends.
Community support help the caregiver to continue their care to the loved one.
一个的话，
We have many friends now, says Lee, a Tai Chi master whose secret to a long life is exercising, socializing, and being happy together. All right, back to our discussion. Paula, we just saw in that piece there, someone living with a spouse. How commonly do you see that in the work you do? Is that the best case scenario for care for our elders?
We see it a lot. I mean, one of the programs that we have is caregiver support, just as they showed in the piece there. And we find that the stress of the caregiver is one of the things that is the most critical about the person they're caring for being able to continue to thrive. And so Family Caregiver Support Program allows the caregiver to have someone who's supporting them through coming in, doing an assessment, seeing just what it is that they need. Do they just need respite for a short period of time? Do they need someone to help them come in to do some chores or cooking? They talked about in the piece not having transportation. That's one of the things that we can set up as well, whether the caregiver themselves needs the transportation or the person they're caring for. So we have 2 different transportation programs. One of our community shuttles will take the participant any place they need to go, and we have volunteer transportation that is for medical appointments. So it's very, very critical.
Yeah. Dwayne, I'm going to bring you in here. Your business is taking care of older people, and I'm trying to figure out the advice you give families, trying to decide between in-home care and a facility.
It depends on a variety of factors, you know, what kind of resources you have at home and so on. You know, we talked earlier about, well, if you're home alone all day, that's not necessarily great depending on your physical condition and so on. So a lot of it has to do with the resources you have at home and the resources you have at the community. I think at Aegis, one of the things that we try to do is provide a holistic kind of lifestyle. So, you know, from a dining experience to what we call life enrichment that has many, many different types of programs. And we try to do what most retirement communities, what we call the 3 Bs. We try to get away from that, the birthday bingo Bible study kind of thing, and we try to be more innovative than those kinds of things and give people really interesting programs. Last year we had our own Woodstock where we had 800 residents come. We had people that were actually at the first Woodstock that came to it.
Oh, wow.
And so,
camping out in the parking lot.
Yeah,
huh?
and we had 3 bands and people wear tie-dye. I mean, it's not what you would think of at a retirement home, but it gives people fulfillment and purpose and so on. So you know, it just depends. It's like anything else. It's like, what hotel am I going to choose? It's the flavor that fits for you.
We're going to dive into a few more of those issues in a bit, but Karen, let me bring you in here. In this piece we just saw, the elder of the family said he did not want to be a burden on his children. I thought that was very interesting because it feels like to me there are some larger cultural considerations that maybe need to be understood here. Sometimes staying in a certain living situation is a matter of family honor and pride, and sometimes staying with a family member is part of that cultural tradition. How do these different cultural factors impact how we age?
Well, culture is very important. It's important how we live, in terms of how we live and how we age. I think what's really important is that we look at various different cultures and we learn from them, and that they can provide insights into ways to age well. Just thinking even about the LGBT community, I wanted to say it's a resilient community. They've had to figure out new and different ways to be able to care for themselves, to provide care, and these are strengths that we can use in the field of aging itself. Although what we also need to make sure is that the aging field is flexible enough, it can adapt and provide services that meet the needs of various different cultures, so that we can be responsive and culturally responsive to what people need given their culture.
And Maureen, I'm going to follow up on that point because I know Seattle is home to a growing immigrant population, and we have families coming in with multiple generations into Seattle, into the country, certainly here in our city. Are you seeing more adult children taking care of their elders, or what's the dynamic that you're seeing right now in terms of trends in Seattle?
No, well, we're seeing a lot of family caregiver scenarios, but I would say it's usually a spouse taking care of the other spouse.
Okay.
In the state of Washington, there was an AARP study that actually showed we're only reaching about 1% of the family caregivers with services that Paula described.
Wow.
What's called the Family Caregiver Program. So we're really only, in this scenario, I mean, this is actually a really good scenario because he has reached out. He's active, he's doing exercise, and he has reached out to bring support into his home. But as I say, we're only reaching 1% of families like that. And going back to the cultural question, a lot of family members don't even identify as caregivers. This is my family duty, and they won't ask for help. So that's a bit of a paradigm shift that we need to do, that it's okay to ask for help, help is available, and in fact, you'll be a better caregiver if you do get help.
Yeah, and Paul, let me have you follow up on that idea, because I think that's a very important takeaway from the story is you got to put your own oxygen mask on first if you're going to help somebody else there. If you're that caregiver, let's speak to those people who might be watching this program. What do you need to have in mind to take care of the elder relative that you're talking about and take care of yourself?
Well, just as you said, you've got to take care of yourself. You have to take care of yourself first. If you're not healthy, you're not going to be a good caregiver to your loved one. And to let them know that there are family caregiver support programs out there. And you can start and call our organization, Sound Generations, and if it is an ethnic-specific caregiver support program that you want, like the one shown in the vignette, we will refer you to them. We can also provide that service ourselves. So again, educating, as Maureen said earlier, educating yourself about what's out there.
And really talking within a family too, I would think, maybe siblings talking to each other. Tell me about that part, because I don't know if that's happening all the time in families.
If you have your family that's split up all over the country and mom is somewhere else, that becomes a big, huge problem. Who is going to take the lead on trying to provide those services? So it's important as part of that planning that families sit down and talk about, okay, if it comes to a time where mom or dad is going to need help in the home, how are we going to do that?
Okay. And Dwayne, I know you dealt with the care of your mother. You now work to take care of your clients as well as employees, I should point out. Tell us about that role of family caregiver and maybe some of the red flags to look for when you're the main caregiver.
It's that sandwich generation where it's the 53-year-old daughter that has the 80-year-old mom and the kid that's in college.
Right.
And you see this really kind of torn loyalties about, geez, do I go to my kid's soccer game or do I go to my mom's Alzheimer's conference? And it's really heartbreaking. I mean, that was my scenario in my own family. My sister was a MSW, her kids were in college, my mom needed daily care, and it creates quite an incredible, difficult family dynamic. And so I think there's a lot more need in that kind of environment. And then it takes a tremendous toll on whoever that caregiver is, whether it's the spouse or the daughter, whatever, on that person emotionally and physically. When we see spouses move into Aegis, I mean, within usually 30 days, the spouse's health, the caregiver, their health dramatically improves because all that weight's lifted. They're not getting up in the middle of the night. They're eating better. They're not taking people to appointments. They're like, they can take care of themselves.
Right.
So it's dramatic.
Karen, let me bring you in here, because in your study of caregivers, it seems like many people might not be properly equipped to care for older people in their homes. And I'm not just talking about the physical side of it, but maybe even psychologically too. I'm thinking about older people in LGBTQ situations here. When you consider those family caregivers, what are some of the biggest challenges they face? How do you overcome those?
Well, first of all, it's important to realize that there's lots of different kinds of caregiving, and we've talked about a few of them here in terms of parent care or spousal care, but there's friend care, and we need to think about this important role that friends also play. It's similar to what Liz was hoping for as she ages, but it's very important that we think about the different kinds of needs that different types of caregivers will have, and then that we can be responsive to those. So trying to encourage communication, trying to educate communities about caregiving. Oftentimes, caregivers are so stressed by the time that that someone even suggests help that their health is already deteriorated. So the earlier, the better, but also being responsive to the different types of care and recognizing that people will not necessarily identify, similar to what Maureen said. They may not even think of themselves as a caregiver. Right. And certainly in the LGBT community, even if they're in a partnership, they're often not recognized as a couple or as caregivers, and so their role is diminished and they're not offered the same types of services. So that's a form of discrimination that needs to be, that everyone has access to culturally competent services and care.
Thanks for that. And Maureen, let me bring you in here. We profiled the Chinese Information and Service Center in that piece we just saw. It's one of many social services organizations getting government funding to help out family members and help them help their elders here. Tell us why family members should be looking for an assist like this and where they can access this kind of help.
Well, they can access the help. We have an information line called Community Living Connections, and that's a centralized phone number that's countywide that people can call and seek out information, or they can go directly to agencies like Sound Generations or Chinese Information Service Center directly. But there is a central clearinghouse phone number that people can call about all older adult and resources for people with disabilities as well.
And important to do that. Why?
Well, again, to know what's out there, to educate yourself. I mean, I just want to talk to the family caregiver topic for a minute, because my mother is 94 years old and she has advanced dementia and she lives in California. So my struggle is I've been in California 8 times already this year, and I'm going to retire soon because I need to spend more time with my mother. So, it impacts all of us. I mean, everybody I know has a family caregiver story, so it's all of us. And then, as I say, the important thing is educating ourselves about what the options are. And then, and some of the challenges also is the changing relationship you have with your loved one. So in my scenario, my relationship with my mother is totally different now than it was even when I was a young adult, because now I'm taking care of her instead of her taking care of me. And I know that for spouses that adds a lot of stress because you're used to that spousal the marriage relationship. But then when the person, let's say with dementia, changes and things don't make sense anymore, or the language is different, or the style of interacting is different, it's very, very stressful from a personal relationship point of view.
I'm going to pause here one more time and take a look at yet another way we are aging in a care facility. We took a tour of Providence Mount St. Vincent in West Seattle to see how an older population is getting some help and learning from a group that hasn't even started kindergarten.
Let's get started, okay?
It's like no other preschool you've ever seen.
We're going to draw your partner's hand.
Because in this class at Providence Mount St. Vincent in West Seattle, older adults are learning right alongside the 4- and 5-year-olds.
I think that's fun because I like kids.
92-year-old Jean Bullard and other residents are connecting with what's called the Intergenerational Learning Center, or ILC.
What color are their fingernails?
It's a daycare located within the Providence facility, a facility with assisted living units and 24-hour skilled nursing care.
So see how many fingers?
The ILC provides a full circle of learning.
5.
Kids gain more knowledge about the elderly, and residents can remain active and feel needed as they adapt to living in a different setting.
Frequently, people come to us just from the hospital, and some sort of crisis has occurred.
Administrator Charlene Boyd knows It's difficult for families to put an elder in a care facility. And with varying physical and mental needs, every case is different.
One size doesn't fit all.
Oh my, she has a ring. Let's put a ring on there.
But Boyd is hoping the ILC is teaching a new generation that we need to think about quality care for our kids and our elders.
We're exposing young families with their young children to the positive aspects of aging so that older adults are not out of sight, out of mind.
It's an important message as more of us grow older. AARP stats show the 65-plus population will increase 89% over the next 20 years in the U.S. At Providence, the average length of stay for residents is 3 to 5 years, above the national average of 2 years and 3 months.
I've been in a hospital for most of my life.
Resident John Goss is a former surgeon, now dealing with his own medical struggle, dementia.
Things have happened as I've gotten old.
Goss says he's enjoying his time here and urges others to have the discussion he did with his family about planning for end-of-life issues.
It's something that you know is going to happen, period.
Which two colors would you like to mix?
Call it a lesson for all of us to respect and celebrate life at both ends of the spectrum.
Let's get back to our discussion here. Paula, there are a lot of different places that help take care of our elders. When the time comes when a loved one needs to be in a care facility, how do you guide families to find the right option, the right fit?
Well, it depends on a lot of factors. You know, what are the needs of that family? What are the needs of the person? Is it someone who is experiencing dementia? Is it someone who wants to stay very independent? Is it someone who needs just a little bit of help or more help? And then, of course, there's the finances, the financial piece of it as well.
Yeah. And in terms of the counseling you offer, how do you do it? Is there something, forms people fill out, or what's the interaction like?
Yes, when somebody calls our Pathways Information Assistance line, we kind of dig deep and do some probing. Oftentimes people aren't sure what it is that they need, and so we ask a lot of questions. And although we don't provide housing or residences, we are very connected into the network of providers out in the community, and so by asking a lot of questions, we try to then refer them out to some place that might be able to meet their needs.
Let me switch gears here a little bit and talk to Dwayne about this. How do you counsel families on this point, finding that right fit? Because I know a lot of people, we heard it in that piece there, sometimes they're coming from a crisis situation in the hospital, they're not sure what to do. What do you tell them? How do you counsel them?
In terms of finding the right fit for them?
Yeah.
Well, we try to go through a discovery process with them and see what they need. And do kind of a needs assessment as to what they're looking for, both from a medical standpoint and just a service standpoint. I think one of the things that people don't understand about seniors housing is the biggest cost differential has to do with land. So this is why people understand, well, why does this cost so much? Well, if you go buy a piece of land in Medina, it's different than going and buy a piece of land in Linwood.
Got it.
So I often tell people, well, geez, if you want to drive 20 minutes more, you may save $1,000 in terms of your expense. Most people don't understand that. The service may be no different, but your land cost, for on a fixed cost standpoint, is probably over 50% of your total cost.
Yeah.
So that's a fixed cost that the operator has to bear. So but if people want to be if they live in Bellevue and they want to be 5 minutes from their home, they're going to pay for that convenience of being 5 minutes from their home because the provider's paying for that land cost.
Yeah. What is that cost range? Just a basic idea.
Well, again, it depends. If you're living in Linwood, you could live in an apartment as cheap as $2,800 a month, and I should explain now that includes all your utilities, all your food, oversight, transportation, activities, housekeeping, all those things. If you have severe dementia and Alzheimer's, it could be over $10,000 a month.
Wow.
And so it just depends on which facility and what your care needs are.
That's important to point that out. Thank you very much for that, Dwayne. Karen, I'm going to bring you in here, and I think it's important to point out that you have been working on a program to improve training for social service workers, especially when it comes to understanding LGBTQ issues and aging. I'm trying to figure out what sort of questions you would ask at an assisted living facility, for example, before deciding whether or not to choose it.
Sure. So at Generations Aging with Pride,
Yeah.
we provide training to Health and Human Services and Housing in terms of ensuring that they can provide culturally competent services, that they are providing environments that are welcoming to the LGBTQ community. So within that organization, that nonprofit organization, we actually have a screener where we are asking places and facilities about access, for one thing.
Yeah.
Are they able to provide housing services in a culturally competent way? What do they know about the needs of LGBTQ midlife and older adults? What do they know about aging? Are their forms developed in a way that it's inclusive of the needs of their other friends and family members? But just how welcoming and supportive is it? And can they be their true selves there?
Maureen, I want to ask this question about resources one more time. In terms of options for families who need elder care around the clock, let's say, they don't have a lot of money to pay for it. We heard about this range from Dwayne here, $2,800 to possibly $10,000 a month. That's a lot of money. How do you counsel families here?
Well, what I know also, I mean, if you're in what we call the private pay market and you have no government funding, you're going to pay about at least $20 an hour for home care.
Yeah.
And you think about adding that up. If you're working and you need somebody at home with your loved one during the day, you know, that's 8 hours times 20, you know, $160, $200 a day. So it really, really adds up. And home care, I think if you did a 24-hour home, it's far more expensive than assisted living or, you know, even specialized dementia care. But well, we advise people, unfortunately, because baby boomers and this is going to get worse in the sense baby boomers don't have savings, and people will spend through their resources either through assisted living or through home care because it is very expensive, and they will then need to apply for Medicaid, which does, in the state of Washington, really does pay for long-term care services. And through Medicaid, you can get in-home caregivers, or you can get payment for assisted living or adult family homes, but unfortunately you do have to spend your resources to get to that point. But once you're on the Medicaid side of things, there are a lot of resources available for you. But then, as I say, you're kind of stuck when you're in this middle income area. If you're you know, relatively well-to-do, you can afford whatever kind of service that you would like. And if you're low income, there are Medicaid services, resources to help you. But if you're in the middle income area, it's really, really tough.
Yeah. Paula, let me have you dovetail on this if I can. In terms of the resources that are out there for people who are concerned about the cost of elder care, I'm just trying to figure out where do people turn? Because we're talking about potentially a lot of money here for families.
Well, again, that's why, you know, our organization exists. It's because those folks that are low income, our services are low donation or no cost, and you know, we have some fee-for-service programs, and we're really targeting that middle income person who cannot afford sort of that higher level concierge personal type of care. You know, it's one of the main concerns for nonprofits that are doing this is that you know, our government contracts don't quite cover the cost, and there are more people who need the services. So every year, so it's really going to be how are we going to pay for those so that those people who are most in need can have the services be available to them still at no or low cost.
Dwayne, how does it work in your facility? Are there some subsidized beds, or how do you help families who are dealing with different cost issues?
Well, first of all, we try to be transparent and help with the planning process. So on the front end of things, that people know what the costs are and try to help them estimate. The second thing is our business model is based off, you know, not off the affluent or the wealthy, but you know, the average teacher, Boeing employee, you know, worker that's retired and made a living in Seattle. But what happens is people dip into their home ownership. So our average person may be, let's say it's a retired teacher, that between Social Security and a pension may have an income of, say, $40,000 a year. But they sold their house in, you know, Renton, and they have $500,000 that they sold their house from. And they're spending their last 3 or 4 years with us, and you know, maybe they're spending $70,000 and they dip into $30,000 a year out of that home equity. So it's affordable for everyone. Now, about 80% of, you know, people in this area own houses. the target that we don't reach, you know, is that 20% that have never had home ownership. So that's the population that's most in need.
Interesting. Thank you very much for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Karen, I wanted to take a little bit of a turn here because I know you're also involved in making sure elder abuse is not happening in our care facilities here. I'm trying to talk to people about what they should be keeping an eye on when it comes to the care of an elderly family member in a care facility.
Sure, so I'll get to that. I want to mention one thing. While there's often the stereotype of the LGBTQ older adult as affluent, that's really often not the case, and many have really had their earnings, they've experienced high rates of discrimination and victimization, and it's the strongest predictor of serious problems in aging and poor health. In terms of elder abuse, we find any older adult that's at risk of isolation has a higher risk of being a potential target for abuse. So in some of our studies, we find high rates of exploitation, financial exploitation, and other types of exploitation of those that are most isolated. Yeah. So what we want to do, and what we do in terms of working with older adults, is making sure that there is someone connected to them that older adults understand what are the signs of abuse, but that other people that are connected with them also understand what are the signs of abuse, because we do see high rates of various different types of exploitation.
Maureen, I wanted to touch on this financial issue one last time here in terms of the different places you send people, the different counseling you give them. I don't want to look at this as something impossible for families. I think there are some options out there, but it just sounds like that, again, one of those types of issues that people do need to talk about within a family, with their parents, whatever else. Help me with that part, because that's not easy for a lot of families.
I really don't know how else you're going to do this if you don't save money. Yeah. It costs money to hire care. Yeah. So I think a lot of people end up going without care. They end up going out without food. They don't necessarily, they might miss their rent. I mean, they may lose their housing. Sure. But I don't really want to paint a really negative picture, because people do get by. They get by. Yeah. You know, in this state, there has been conversation about how to create a long-term care payment process. And there is actually attached to the state legislature, there's a joint legislative committee looking at that very topic of financing long-term care. So I think if we can find that solution where it's more, I mean, it's not necessarily the private market long-term care insurance, but some way of public financing of long-term care, that's truly what's needed, because it impacts everybody. Yeah. I mean, it's just like homeowners insurance and driver's insurance. Yeah. It's going to impact everybody, and we need to have a broad-based system to help people with those costs.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I need to start wrapping up the show. There's been a great discussion here, and I think I'm going to start with you, Maureen, and come down the line here. We're going to have a lot more older people with us in years to come. The over 65 population, the stats say, will roughly double in the next 40 years. What's the best way to prepare for that within our families, within our community?
This new generation that's aging, I mean, they're going to shake things up. They're going to ask for things differently. They're not going to be content with the way services are currently being provided. I mean, we're all aging experts, and I think in the future, I mean, services are going to be provided by all sectors of our economy, not just by an aging sector. And as I say, I think things are going to be provided in very, very different ways that we can't even imagine. Yeah. I mean, there's going to be new ideas and different ways of doing things that are not at all in this aging context. Yeah. So that's why I'm hopeful. There's going to be millions and millions of people who are going to be between 55 and 85, let's say. And I think there's going to be a profound transformation of what our society looks like because of that bulk, that huge group of people.
Very important
And we can't do cookie cutter services either.
No, important points all there. Thank you for bringing that up. Karen, I'll head to you. Sure. Your thoughts on preparing for a future with more older people in our families and our society as a whole?
Well, I think longevity is a success, and I think aging is a wonderful thing. But what we're trying to do also is think about generations working together. Yeah. So it's the young, it's the old, it's the in-between, it's the boomers, it's the, you know, and then how does that look? How does life look when we start thinking about how are ways that we can keep everyone engaged and use technology? I mean, I think technology, people often think that that's a negative, but for people that have been isolated or whatever, technology can provide real opportunities. Yeah. And we need how to work with older adults and the rest of the generations to think about ways we can make that benefit.
Yeah, help with the interaction piece, sure.
Yes, both locally and globally.
Okay.
So I'm
All right.
excited about it.
Dwayne, your thoughts on the future of
I have
aging?
a very long answer.
Here we
for
go.
You, but I'll try to be quick.
Let her rip.
But,
yeah.
So I think it starts with innovation. You know, Aegis is a company that's thrown out every concept of every previous long-term care provider's ever done, because people don't want to live in old folks' home. My favorite story is when we opened Aegis of Madison, we had a FedEx man come into our building delivering a package, and he walked in the first week we opened, and I was sitting there checking my email, and he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry." And I go, "Can I help you?" He goes, "Oh, I had a package for Aegis of Madison, but this is not it." I go, "This is it?" And he goes, "Are you kidding me?" So, you know, he couldn't believe this environment.
Yeah.
I think the second thing is medicine within the senior care is going to be personalized. So I was in a meeting in this last month where we're actually starting a program to take people's, if people want to volunteer, blood samples and look at their vitamin mineral content and have vitamins every 6 months designed for their DNA and their genomic blood type.
Okay.
That's innovative for seniors. I think the third thing is we're going to start to see people cluster in different ways by interest, you know, nationality, whatever. So we're building our all-Chinese building in the Newcastle area. We have an intergenerational program with a daycare and a preschool and stuff. That property has been so successful. We have hundreds and hundreds of leads on that property. So I think it all starts with innovation, how we look at like personalized medicine and architecture and programming and fitting in. And so it's on a different trajectory than it ever has been.
Great to hear that. Thank you very much for that. Paul, I'll let you wrap up here. Final thoughts as we close up the show, the future of aging from your perspective.
We live in a very youth-oriented society, and we have had a focus on youth as being something to invest in, because we're investing in the future of those children and investing in the future of our society. And we look at the other end of the spectrum, and people see aging as people are at the end of their life, and everything that's going to happen there is an expense. And we need to change that conversation to have people understand the gifts that older people bring to our communities. And that's why I like the idea of the last vignette of the intergenerational. It's one of the reasons we changed our name from just Senior Services to Sound Generations, to let people know that we want to make sure all generations are connected together in support of seniors, because they're a really critical and vital part of our communities.
Okay, thank you very much for this. Thank you all for the input here today. This has been a great program here at Living Longer, Living Well. Please go to our website, seattlechannel.org, for more information and also links to some of the services you've heard about. I'm Brian Callanan, and until next time, live well.